Oh, goodness me, we got the graveyard shift, didn't we? But thanks for sticking with it. Yay, DPW. And it's because of Schiphol. And do you know what? I have empathy with it because I flew in this morning and it was 2 hours. And so to make peace with the Dutch universe, I've gone all orange. Please forgive me whatever I did. Don't let Schiphol do it again.
And Kathryn was wearing...
You forgive me. Do I get an extra point? Oh.
She didn't have a hoodie, but she turned up in blue trainers.
I did have blue trainers. Well, anyway, but that's not really what we're talking about. It's true. We're going to talk about getting a digital procurement party right. So as Andrew said, I am Kathryn Thompson. I lead our procurement practice for Deloitte in the UK and do have over 20 years, tragically, over 20 years experience in this space, back from when even Ariba was a best of breed in the year 2000 when it was an on-premise tool, pre-SAP days, and pretty much everything in between since. And I'm delighted to be on stage with someone with a point less than me, my good friend Lauren.
We're Australian, we're also from competing states in Australia, which is always not a good thing. But we're here to have some fun and we're here to really help lift the mood because we are on the graveyard shift.
So what we're going to talk about is something we've both over the years seen lots of best of breeds, full techs, our experiences, and how to make them a digital procurement party. Oh, we already did this bit. We're honing this point in, aren't we? Here are the different things we can do to get your digital procurement party right. Best of breed versus single suite. Number one, we're going to talk about getting the atmosphere right, so going beyond just having a right venue. We're going to talk about who you invite to that party to get the audience right. We're going to talk about speed. Don't leave your guests waiting. So how to get speed to value and speed to deployment. We're talking about endurance. That's the hard thing about all this, right? As well as speed, you've got to have endurance too. So keep that party going for a long time. Some of us were at SIP's Part Awards last night. Some of you are in Amsterdam. I don't know which one needed more endurance. We're going to talk about pairings. So food and wine matching, data and integration matching, all these sorts of things that go in sync, and word of mouth. There's no point having a great party if no one knows about it. So we're going to talk about how to get the change management and comms around your digital procurement transformation right as well. Sound good? Yeah. Woo! Should we get the party started?
Let's get the party started, like Pink said.
Let's go. Digital procurement party.
So going beyond a great venue, we as a procurement function the last probably couple of years have been a bit unkind to many of our guests, and we should not treat all of our guests the same way. Yesterday we heard a lot about from Unilever about regenerative agriculture. Our organisation, Diageo, is very much moving into working with smallholder farmers. Farmers are not suppliers. That would be one really big observation for me. You have to be kind to... We can't treat a supplier that's perhaps in Mexico that may or may not be literate, that may or may not be having access to computers. They'll have an access to a phone. We can't treat them like a big, large, mega supplier of ours. We have to treat them differently. Large suppliers. I am getting a plethora of complaints from lots of suppliers, particularly in the direct supply base, because we are hitting them up with lots of portal requests, lots of data requests. We've got the same supplier getting hit up for recycled content, plastic content, reporting around emissions, where their sites are, and we're collecting the same information multiple times. The other friends we forgot to invite to the party in creating that great atmosphere is our good old accounts payable friends. I've actually shopped the whole floor these last couple of days looking at fantastic portal, SRM, ESG solutions, and not one is really getting into the space of harvesting our rich accounts payable data around ESG. I can tell you now there's really rich stuff that we're not getting into by talking to our accounts payable functions and friends. Things like our energy utility bills, our fuel consumption and our fuel bills, all these sort of things. How do we better, please, startups, come and speak to me about how you're going to harvest that data so that I have less complaints in my inbox from our large corporate suppliers that are responding to so many requests and getting very severe portal fatigue.
So we're going to be kind to our guests, but we also have to think about who we're going to invite to our party. And so I guess when you think about people or company, well, let's start with people because we're going to make it a party analogy. We're going to work this through the whole way through. We don't just take the surface of what's there now. What's a really exciting party guest is someone that talks about their aspirations and their dreams and what they'll do next and what happens after. Maybe someone you've had some history and legacy with. And we should think of the same... Actually, a real bugbear for me if a conversation you might get stuck within a party. I don't know if you guys have this, but it's when you're talking with someone and you sort of like, what sort of things are you interested in? They're like, I don't know, what are you interested in? It's going out, would you like to go out afterwards? Yeah, would you like, well, if you'd like to go out afterwards, okay, what sort of food? What sort of food? We could go to a restaurant, what sort of food? Whatever food you like to like. We can cook or we can clean. You're like, oh man, this is not a decisive thing. What's a really exciting conversation is someone that knows what they want and has a bit of direction and conviction about it. And doubly so for our digital procurement software vendors, right? Another cringe moment, all these cringe moments in my life, I hope that you have, in addition to this, Shipal, is when a company I'm working with says, you know, Kathryn, we're running this spec and select, and it's so great. I met this software vendor. They'll do whatever I want. No,
that's magic.
That's magic, exactly. And then I say to them, we could act it out. Are you a software company, a procurement software company? No. If you are a drinks manufacturer, let's stick to that. Or if you're a pharmaceutical company, I see you guys, stick to it. Software producers are really great at what they're doing. And the best ones are the ones that have got some conviction about what they're doing. So they've put effort into learning their art. They've got, for example, if they're a great CLM company I can see here, then they'll have some of their contract and legal teams there helping shape some really good thinking around it. So a company that will say, we've put a lot of thought into it, this is a really good direction, this is how I can show you, and they can flex and have some, of course we can configure things always, but not completely customized, because that's when you get data sets all not connected and working. Similarly, I talked about it's really nice to have at your party people that maybe you've known a long time, but also if you've known someone a while, probably you have stuff in common, and if you do need extra people at your party, like we need in this room right now, you can say, who else do you know? Who's got a similar sort of vibe to you, or different people that you know, and they will introduce and connect, and it should be a good party. Same with your tech landscape. So if there is a software vendor that you work with, whatever the field is, even if it's loosely created, it's worth having a conversation with them about whatever challenge you've got next. Because it can be they're either going to do an alliance or an acquisition, or they're developing code themselves that could really take forward, if you've got a good vibe going with a tech company, there might be something there they could do to a future solution that you're looking forward to.
I couldn't agree more. Just in attending the last couple of days, speaking to many providers, and I learned new things and new features they were rolling out that I had absolutely no idea from reading articles, reading publications, and also speaking. I'm a big fan, as you know, I network a lot with my peer set, not competitors, but I take away little nuggets from, I've got a friend at Roche here and many of the pharmaceutical companies, FMCG companies. I will save myself months of tendering and assessment by speaking to other clients, understanding who they're using, understanding the product gaps, what's good, what's not good. They often tell me when there's new features because I'm not going to be reading 500 pages of release notes, to be frank. So I really networking among the peer set and building those relationships with peers and leaders in certain parts of whether it's ESG, risk, who are the good procurement operators and functions that are really leading, and learn from them and pick off their best-of-breed solution partners. I think the other piece for me is the time that saves. So I've had situations where I've selected some of the partners that might be in this room through a conversation with another peer. It's not actually been, we did run a tender process, but the initial meeting, the initial discussions all came out of referrals from other clients or other peers. And that is huge. I didn't meet my husband through tendering or Tinder or speed dating. I met him in an old-fashioned pub, and that is the art of networking, isn't it? A great party is the art of networking, getting knowledge and experience from others that are not competitors, and really leveraging that to save yourself time and money.
So on the topic of saving time and money, this is our Cinderella picture part of the party. Speed, don't leave your guests waiting. So we've all been to those parties where, I didn't realize how much of this is a gripe, those parties where they take ages to bring out the food, or ages to bring out the drink, or ages before other people get there, and you're like, oh man, this is lame, I accidentally went to a lame party. Or ages before someone realizes there's no music or conversation. Don't do that, because people find out as well, and then what happens? You get in a vicious cycle, right? Because then people know that you throw lame parties, and people start coming later, because they're like, that's a party where everything happens late all the time, and then everything latens again. In digital procurement world, it happens as well, right? We sometimes see companies get very caught up in testing and testing and testing. We RFI and then we RFP and we do repeated. Yes, we need to study the market and proof of concepts have their place and things like that, but it should be proportionate to the value that you intend to get out of a given problem statement. So sort of, we've both seen, we've talked about lots of different companies where people spend so long in a decision process that even the tech changes in the course of an RFP or a selection process, and what you're choosing from at the end is not the same as what you had at the beginning. You've missed a boat, or new competitors have come and gone as well. There's a speed to deployment, so a speed to value element. There are some techs that you can deploy really quickly and start getting a return on investment faster than others. Sometimes you might be able to get that value faster than it would have taken you to run an extensive selection process, depending on the process and the tech and what things you're trying to fit into. So we're all good procurement professionals, hopefully. We should be looking at the total cost of ownership, cost and benefit of ownership of a given system technology choice, and how that can work as a speed decision, not just a point-in-time choice. Same in this total cost of ownership picture is the cost of replacement. So sometimes stuff is pretty easy to experiment, and especially with some of the more embryonic technologies that we might see with some of the best of breed plays, it's worth having that gamble if the cost to replace is not too high as well. So when you factor in all the different choices of speed that you could make, it's worth taking that full picture there.
I think just to build on that too, just in coming here, there's certain solution providers that have moved much broader than the best of breed functionality, to the extent that technically I could retire some of the things in the stack. So it's very much worth staying close to where those evolutions are going. So next one is endurance. Making the party last. Another thing Australians are quite good at too, I must say. For the long haul. I think part of the success of looking at best of breed applications is making sure you've got a robust support model, which, to be frank, is very challenging. If you've got a best-of-breed application, there's a lack of capability to actually operate and run the application, and it can be expensive. You might have one stranded resource that knows one particular system, and if they leave because people are poaching them, then that information and that knowledge is lost. So I do think there's a place for partnering with third parties, whether that's an outsourced provider that has a few more of those clients and a few more of those pools of resources they can access. Often I have been caught out where that one person has left and the knowledge is very hard to retain, recruit and promote. So the right people, while I'm on that topic, I think often in terms of making the party last, the other thing I often see is people place too much emphasis on, oh, well, that didn't work, or that party failed because we didn't have the right comms and change management approach. I think the poor comms and change people have had all the blame for too many years. Where I see the party fails or doesn't work well is often in the design stage. So way before UAT, I will invest in absolute gold dust resources around solution architecture, data architecture, because what's critical in my mind about making these best-of-breed applications work, I'm a big business, we need to connect them to the ERP. If you don't connect them properly, then you've either got people double entering information in multiple portals, or you've got a situation where your accounts payable or back office are having to deal with lots of error rates because the integrations fail. So, and that costs money in terms of the TCO. So really thinking about what are the really good design solution resources you need to bring into the project. And in my mind, someone that's great at just process, that's not good at the technology, or just great at the general strategy consulting aspects but doesn't know the tech and how to apply it, is a little bit dead to me. I really very much look for someone that's a bit of a unicorn, actually, someone that understands the best of breed, business practices around procurement. I think too often we as procurement function design our own and then we have to live with a huge mess and clean up. But really adopting and learning for some of those templated processes and the parties that know how to apply the technology on top, I think is pretty critical to success.
These people are poor people dead to you all the time. It's so harsh.
Australians can always be a bit brutal and direct too, we must warn.
See, I've lived in Europe a little bit longer. So pairings, we're going to talk about pairings because obviously, right, and Diageo also have non-alcoholic spirits, we should say. So the pairing can be anytime, getting your food and wines and drinks and flavours to match. And this is where I have to say, that I talked about many, many years in digital procurement experience. I did as well for a while own and run a wine bar. So this is a true story, expert at wine and food matching. And I fancy myself a bit of like a James Bond in this sort of way, right? So do you remember the one, I can't remember the movie, and he catches out the spy because he tried to have fish with red wine, and he's like, no real knowledgeable person would match those together. And he's right? It doesn't work because fish has a really high iron content, and it tastes disgusting with the tannins in a red wine, and you have it, and it's an offensive thing in your mouth that tastes really bitter, like tea bags in tea for too long. Pairings going wrong is a true thing. It's not a myth or a made-up thing about how food and wine or cocktails and fruits and all these things can go together. There's real flavor pairings. And there are also, you'll be surprised, watch this seamless segue, data and digital procurement and technology pairings that work or not as well. So I'm going to talk about three things in this regard. We're going to talk about data, we're going to talk about processes, we're going to talk about releases as the sort of things we need to really pair up to get our digital procurement party to go really well. I think this doesn't seem too contrived, do you?
No.
I think it's smooth.
No.
So data, what we're talking about here, there can be basic data mapping things, right? And we get tripped up all the time by really simple stuff like one system has a supplier address with 3 lines and one has a supplier address with 4 lines. And yes, of course, we can get the middleware to do a little bit of magic in between and add the logic of that 4th line or whatever we decide to do. But every single time we make one of those choices, we're creating technical debt for our firm. It means every time there's a release or an upgrade or something happens, we have to redo and test all of those different things and regression test it through and consider it all. And that's fine, as long as you're conscious that that's a choice you're making and that the more different data systems you've got building into one different architecture, the more of those technical debt scenarios you're creating for yourself. So it's worth thinking through how you're going to get that data to sync across different systems. And a spoiler alert here, and I can't see everyone in the room because of the lighting, so I might get in trouble later, but the single suites aren't seamless data between them either, right? A lot of them have grown through acquisition and things as well. So the data disrupt isn't simply a best-of-breed problem. It can also happen in some of the single suites early on. True, a benefit of a single suite is the onus is on them to then fix that problem over time. It's just something to think of when you're doing your pairings of different systems. The second thing I talk about is processes, and this is the one that actually trips people up most, I think, because as I said, with technical data type issues, we can build around it, we can make some choices, we can exclude data, we can manually add it, whatever we do. Processing consistency means that we're starting to compromise on a choice of policy that we've decided to make. And that's a more difficult thing to do for ourselves. If we really want an integrated third-party management solution, which I think we do, we don't choose to operate in silos if we can choose against it, then we have to think about how the processes are going to work together. So I think we've all been in a situation where we go and we see the demo and they say seamless source to contract, source to pay solution. You're going to run a tender and then it's going to cascade into a contract and you're going to buy off the contract and everyone's going to live, it's going to 3-way match straight away and happily ever after. Now, the thing is, and when you do your sourcing event, sometimes that can work, right? But a lot of the time when we do a tender, we don't always, especially for more complex things, want to award and contract immediately. Quite often, especially when it's more complicated, we might want to have a preferred vendor, and then we might want to go into a really nice contract management solution where we can edit and redline together with the supplier about how we want it to work. Now, something might fall apart in contracting situation, so then I want to go back to the vendor I had, or I might want to do the redlining with 2 vendors. If I have a sourcing solution or an overall architecture that says I'm only going to trigger that integration to a contract management system when my source is awarded, we already have a breakdown because that's not the native, natural way I want to do my sourcing and contracting activity. So, and multiply that across anything. Think about we've got these amazing third-party risk management solutions available to us now. Fantastic, wonderful. The different types of questions we want to ask in an RFI process or as partway through an RFP process. Do we do it when we're down to our bottom 2 suppliers, when we've only chose 1, as part of supplier onboarding? If we are going to have third-party risk questions percolated throughout our process, are we going to pop out to the system at every single juncture we need it? And every time we make one of those choices, we create the possibility of a process inconsistency. And that's when our pairings go a bit red wine and fish, or have the potential to. So it's worth thinking through, at least when you architect it through, how we're going to get our process to run smoothly and how your software vendors can work with you. If you have chosen best of breed because it's got super great tech, that's something to talk through with them. How are we going to get the data pairing? How are we going to get the process pairing to work? Then third, also bad, is releases and upgrades. Lauren already mentioned it. And I would say another part of my career story here is I haven't just done consulting and wine bars as well. I worked in industry for 7 years between BP and BHP Billiton, doing digital procurement stuff. And whenever I made a career choice going between consulting or industry, and particularly in the later years as the software as a service technologies came about, on the naughty list for industry for me is having to deal with release management. Because now we have all these techs, which are so great they all upgrade every 3-4 months. Being responsible for keeping track of all of those and making sure I'm getting the best to harvest my license and make sure they all talk to each other in the right way and we've communicated the right change and we've thought through the policy implications is pretty tricky. So I think you want to think through, if you're looking at best of breed versus single suite, what the implications for how many release cycles you can juggle at once are. I know mine isn't very great, but that's why we have teams, right? So there are people that maybe like this sort of thing, but there is a role there. If you are going to have a hybrid environment, to have someone, or even a single environment, someone on point for looking at the different release notes coming through, thinking of not just what regression tests need to be rerun. That's just minimum viable. That's not even minimum viable product. You need to think through the process and training and people and policy implications of any of those changes as well. And there could be stuff that you really could be taking advantage of that you aren't now. But then trying to marry that up across all the different systems is a task, right? And the more different release cycles from different companies you have to play with, the bigger that task comes. So that needs to be resourced for if you're going to do a best of breed trade-off. And it's part of that total cost benefit of ownership. Is that a fair assessment of industry woes?
Absolutely. You know that I've had experience in past organisations where someone's got release notes and I've never seen them for years. So you've got to make sure that those also come through to the business and not just sit in a back office digital and technology team that don't talk to parts of the business using the applications. Could not agree more, Kathryn. So our last area is word of mouth. What on earth is the purpose of a good party if nobody else knows about it? So let's all shout about this session, let's all post on social media, reflect on the journey the last couple of days and share it with your peers. Let's shout about how excited we are with these new technologies that are available to us as a procurement community. So my number one tip here is that it's great to have release notes and it's great to have all this sort of stuff, but I personally have invested in resources in my team. I see procurement as digital, and I've said this to my technology partners as well. I've invested in resources that stay very connected to the technology. They stay connected to the events. They stay connected to, they run sessions with the technology partners on release notes, and they translate them in a way that the business will understand or users will understand. So that is very critical in thinking about that post-support model for B2B, business to best of breed applications. The other piece is make sure you shake the tree on how good the innovation and the roadmap capability is in those organisations. Sometimes I do hear on word of mouth from other providers, other peers of mine, that their best of breed solution provider has forgotten about them because they've got very excited about an IPO or getting acquired by somebody else. So I think really shaking the tree on what is their long-term strategy, what is the future roadmap of the product, getting underneath that. Also staying close to the rumour mill. Often I'll hear rumours before something might come out about what's happening with certain technology through peers or network discussions. Adoption, just a show of hands, how many people in the room in terms of really building momentum and word of mouth and positive messages about best of breed applications, how many of us actually measure not just utilisation of the technologies, but the user satisfaction? How many people actually measure how happy people are in the business that are using the technologies, or the suppliers are with the portals that we use? Just a show of hands. So supplier satisfaction with our technology that we push to them? Very few. So We in Diageo do an annual supplier survey, and we're actually asking about their experience in working with us around their technology. I'm sure we'll get some feedback around how we're engaging with them on the various ESG requirements we have around data requests during the year. But it's very, very important to actually, we see our suppliers as our customers, particularly the most critical suppliers to us, and we do take that feedback into the consideration and the selection of how we make digital selections. So word of mouth is very critical in terms of not just the supplier satisfaction, but we have 6,000 buyers across our organisation. I also see those as customers of the procurement services strategically, but also the technology platforms that they use. I would say, having scouted the room, I'd like to mystery shop. I didn't hear many people talking about the usability, not just in the procurement function, but in the business or the suppliers, and what the supplier feedback's been. I can guarantee you, before I do my next selection of new technologies in ESG, I'll be talking to some of the larger suppliers about will they be prepared to share some of the information we want to collect on carbon disclosure. I do hear from lots of different FMCGs and other organisations that there's a real reticence by suppliers to actually share that, and so we need to really look at some of the solutions with a grain of salt to say, what's the adoption, how's it going to be taken up by the supply base, and bring the suppliers much more into the conversation around how we design and deploy and make those decisions on the technologies. So, word of mouth. We've got 3 minutes to spare, so we knew we'd finish on time, or close to. Kathryn, where should we take the party next?
We're going to wrap this up. It's true that she does do this gossip thing, by the way. She goes and asks about people. It's very unnerving. I don't think we did a wrap-up slide, just a Deloitte slide. We will wrap. So that is the different things we wanted to talk about in making your digital procurement party great. Thank you for coming and listening with us. We know you've all got a choice of how you spend your time. Schiphol is definitely going to be in some of our futures based on my experience this morning. One thing to sort of leave you guys with, I'm guessing because you've attended this session and you're at Digital Procurement World and you're thinking maybe about buying some sort of tech or something like that, I hope you're really excited about it, because it really is an amazing time and an amazing thing to be a part of. There's so much good technology now. Like I was saying, back in the year 2000, I had like 2 to choose from. We have so many now, and we can, and it was never single suite. It did a requisition or it did an auction. We have so much now we can do. We never had so many tools in our armory. There's a lot of people that can help you, either consulting firms or peers. There's lots of different ways out there, events like this, to get information so that you can stand on the shoulders of giants and have a really amazing, it could be the best 3 months, 1 year, 3 years of your life, however, career, building out some tech that you could be really proud of. So thanks for joining us. Hopefully this is useful. We're both around. I think Deloitte, our booth is booth 11. There might be, I don't know when this party really ends, the Digital Procurement World Party, but we'll be out there or floating around, or otherwise we're all online, and we'd love to meet you, especially these nice people that are running supplier surveys. There's like 3 of them, but they're good. And see who got the most points in the end, because I don't know if, Andrew, were you keeping score through the presentation, but I'd like to know how that ended. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you later.